We came for land, expecting an easy score from an old rancher, but found ourselves face to face with a retired Delta Force legend whose past intertwined with our boss in a way we never saw coming. What will Carmine do when he hears the truth Elias has been keeping about his brother? The old car smelled like stale smoke and cheap air freshener. Dust devils danced outside the windows as Vinny drove, his knuckles white on the wheel, even though the road was straight and empty. Misa, I just watched the endless brown fields roll by. Carmine gave us the address on a crumpled piece of paper. Just lean on him, he grunted, stuffing a few bills in Vinny's hand. Old guy, runs a ranch. Wants him to sell. He's being difficult. Make him see sense. Easy money, Vinny had said. A nice drive in the country. My stomach twisted a little, though. The country always felt too quiet, like something was waiting just under the surface. We drove for what felt like forever. The city disappeared behind us, then the small towns, then just nothing. Just land and sky. Vinny hummed some annoying tune under his breath, tapping his fingers. He was always like that, trying to seem cool and tough. He wore a leather jacket, even though it was pushing 80 degrees. Said it completed the look. I wore a t-shirt. My look was just trying not to sweat too much. Almost there, Vinny said, pointing at a sign that was mostly faded. Says Miller Road. Carmine's guy said it's the big one at the end. We turned onto a dirt road that was even dustier than the main one. The car bounced and rattled. The ranch house showed up after a few miles, small at first, then getting bigger. It wasn't some fancy spread you see in movies, just a plain house, a barn that looked a little saggy in the middle, and a corral with a few horses. No fancy gates, no guard dogs barking their heads off. Just quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat, loud in your ears. I looked around. The sun was starting to dip, painting the sky in orange and purple. Looked nice, but it felt wrong being here. Like we didn't belong. Like this place had its own rules. See? Nothing to it, Vinny said, pulling the car to a stop near the house. He killed the engine, and the quiet rushed back in. No city sounds, just the wind and the buzzing of bugs I couldn't even see. Vinny grabbed the crowbar from the back seat. He liked to bring it along. Said it made people more cooperative. I just zipped up my jacket pocket, feeling the weight of the little something I carried. Just in case. All right, Sal, Vinny said, grinning, that nervous edge still in his eyes if you look close. Showtime. We got out. The air felt different out here, cleaner maybe, but also heavy. I looked at the house. Windows were dark. Didn't look like anyone was home, but the car was parked by the barn. Vinny led the way, walking with a bounce in his step that didn't feel real. He was putting on a show, for me, for himself. I followed a few steps behind, scanning the property. Nothing moved. No curtains twitched. It was like the whole place was holding its breath. My skin crawled. This was too easy, which usually meant it wasn't easy at all. We walked up to the porch. Old wood, creaky under our cheap shoes. A couple of worn-out chairs sat by the door. Everything looked old, used but cared for. Not run down. Just lived in. Vinny stepped up to the door, the one with peeling blue paint. He raised his hand, the crowbar dangling. He was about to knock, but then the door started to open, slow and quiet, before he even touched it. That's when a feeling in my gut went from uneasy to cold dread. Nobody opens the door that slow when two strangers walk up their path. Nobody. Who was on the other side, waiting for us. My hand was already up to rap on the door, the crowbar feeling solid and ready in my grip. This was my part, the talking, the making them understand. Sal hung back a bit, like he always does. Good kid, Sal just thinks too much. Me, Vinny, I'm about action. Carmine said this guy, Elias, was being a problem. My job was to make him see that Carmine wasn't someone you say no to. Easy. Probably just some scared old coot who watched too much TV. The door creaked open. Slowly. Like real slow. My hand froze mid-knock. That wasn't how scared people open doors. Scared people open them a crack, or they don't open them at all and yell through the wood. This was deliberate. And then I saw him, standing in the doorway. He was old, yeah, silver hair, lines on his face like cracks in dry earth. But he wasn't small. He was solid like a tree trunk. And his eyes, they weren't scared eyes. They were just looking. Right through me, it felt like. No expression, just still. like a statue but alive. It was unsettling. "Hey, old man," I started, putting on my tough voice. Tried to grin, but it felt wobbly. "Heard you own this place. Nice spread." He didn't say anything, just kept looking. Didn't move a muscle. Didn't even blink, I don't think. It was starting to mess with my head a little. Was he deaf? Was he just stupid? "We're here for Mr. Carmine," I said, louder this time. Thumped the crowbar against my leg. Just a little, to make a point. "Mr. Carmine's interested in buying your land. He made you an offer." Still nothing. Just those eyes. Like deep water you can't see the bottom of. It was getting under my skin. Nobody just stares. Nobody. "Look," I said, my voice losing some of its toughness, getting a little sharp instead. "Mr. Carmine doesn't like being told no. He's a busy man. He wants this sorted. You sign the papers, you get the money, we all go home happy." I took a step closer, tried to puff out my chest. "Or things get messy. You understand." He finally moved. Not a flinch, not a step back. Just a slow tilt of his head, like he was listening to something far away. "Messy." His voice was quiet, real quiet, but it wasn't shaky. It was smooth, like river stones. It didn't sound old. It sounded like, well, I didn't know what it sounded like, but it wasn't right. "I understand messy," he said, and still that blank look in his eyes. But something shifted around them. A tiny change, like a shadow moving at the edge of your sight. My palms were starting to sweat. This wasn't going like it was supposed to. This old guy wasn't acting like any old guy I'd ever pushed around. He wasn't scared. He wasn't mad. He wasn't even confused. He was just there. And the way he said, "messy," it wasn't a question. It was like he knew exactly what that word meant. Maybe in a way I didn't. I gripped the crowbar tighter. "Yeah, messy," I repeated, trying to sound tough again. "Things could get real messy for you if you don't cooperate." He just kept looking. And then, without any warning, his gaze dropped, not to my face, but to the crowbar in my hand. Just a brief glance. But it felt like he wasn't seeing the tool. He was seeing right through it. And for a split second, a single awful moment, I didn't feel like the guy with the weapon. I felt like the kid who brought a stick to a knife fight. What was wrong with this picture? That feeling, the one like spiders crawling on my neck, got worse when Vinny squared up. He took another step towards the old man, Elias, puffing his chest out again, trying to look big and scary. "You think this is a game?" Vinny's voice was loud now, trying to cover up the shaky sound it had a second ago. He held the crowbar up a little, not a full swing, but a clear threat. The sun was lower now, long shadows stretching across the porch. Everything felt stretched and thin, like the air before a storm. Elias just stood there, still as a fence post. Didn't move. Didn't blink. "Mr. Carmine is a very patient man." Vinny pushed on, stepping closer. "But his patience is running thin. Just sign the papers, old man. Make it easy on yourself." He even took a small step onto the first porch step, getting right up close. I watched Elias's eyes. Still no fear. Nothing I could read at all. Just watching. And that was the scary part. He wasn't reacting the way people were supposed to. He was like a wall. A really old, hard wall. Vinny raised the crowbar a little higher. "Last chance," he growled. He was trying too hard. I knew it. He knew it. And I bet Elias knew it too. This was the point where most people folded. Started crying, begging, whatever. Not Elias. He just looked. It was like he was waiting for something. Waiting for Vinny to make a mistake. And I suddenly knew, deep down where the cold dread lived, that Vinny was about to make a very big one. My hand went to the pocket where I kept my little piece of protection. Just having my fingers touch the rough metal made me feel a tiny bit better, but not much. This old man wasn't just tough. He was something else. Something I didn't have a name for. Vinny shifted his weight, getting ready to swing. Just a little tap, maybe, just to show he was serious. That's when Elias moved. It wasn't fast, not like a sprint. It was more like everything else froze, and he just glided. He didn't step back. He didn't step forward. He just seemed to shift. 1 second he was standing there, and the next he was slightly to the side, and his hand, that old, weathered hand, moved in a blur I couldn't follow. It wasn't a punch or a shove. It was something else. His fingers brushed against Vinny's wrist, the one holding the crowbar. Just a touch. But Vinny yelled, a sharp, surprised sound, and the crowbar clattered onto the porch boards. Vinny stumbled back, clutching his hand like he'd been stung by a wasp. He stared at Elias, his eyes wide with disbelief and pain. It happened so fast, so quietly, that if I hadn't been watching, I might have missed it. Just a touch, and the crowbar was gone, and Vinny was hurting. How'd he do that? An old man with just his hand? It didn't make sense. It broke all the rules I knew. Elias didn't follow up, didn't attack. He just stood there, exactly where he was before, looking at Vinny with the same unreadable expression. The silence came back, thicker this time, broken only by Vinny's ragged breathing. My own heart was hammering against my ribs. I didn't pull out my piece. My hand stayed in my pocket, frozen, because I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that drawing it wouldn't make me safer. It would just make things worse. What kind of old man could disarm Vinny, who was bigger and stronger and younger, with just a touch? This wasn't a rancher. This was something we weren't prepared for. Something Carmine didn't tell us about. The world was tilted and blurry for a second. All I felt was a sharp sting in my wrist, like hitting a funny bone, but way, way worse, and then the hard wood of the porch under my feet as I stumbled back. My hand felt like it was on fire, buzzing and numb all at the same time. The crowbar was on the ground, far away somehow. I stared at my hand, flexing my fingers. They worked, but it hurt like hell, and I couldn't figure out how it happened. He just touched me, lightly, an old man. Then I looked at him, Elias. He was still standing there, calm as you please. Didn't even look like he'd moved. Sal was standing behind me, still and quiet. He looked pale, like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. I know I felt like I was looking at something that wasn't real. How could he do that? How could he take the crowbar from me like it weighed nothing, just with a touch? It wasn't strong, it was something else. Like he knew exactly where to touch, exactly how hard, to make everything stop working right. My chest felt tight. This was supposed to be easy. A simple shakedown. Get the paper signed, get paid, go back to the city. Now I was standing here on some dusty porch, my hand throbbing, staring at an old man who moved like smoke and hit like a hammer you never saw coming. My mind was racing, trying to put it together. Guys we knew, tough guys, talked about stuff like this sometimes. Stories about soldiers, the real spooky ones who could do things normal people couldn't. Move silently, hit impossible targets, fight with nothing but their hands. They sounded like fairy tales. But looking at Elias, I didn't think they were fairy tales anymore. What are you? I finally managed to croak out. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded small, weak. Elias just looked at me. Still no expression, but his eyes seemed older now. Tired. He didn't answer my question. Didn't have to. The way he stood, the way he moved, even the way he breathed, it all screamed that he wasn't just a rancher. He wasn't just an old man. I looked at Sal. He was watching Elias, his eyes wide. He looked just as lost as I felt. We came here thinking we were the tough ones, the guys in charge. But standing on this porch, with the quiet pressing in and my hand hurting, I knew the truth. We were the sheep, and we just poked a wolf. A wolf who was old. Yeah, but maybe that just meant he knew more ways to bite. And he hadn't even really bitten yet. He'd just shown us a tooth. And it was enough to make my blood run cold. How do you fight someone who can do that? Someone who doesn't even look scared when you're holding a weapon? We were in way over our heads, and the water was getting deeper fast. My heart was still pounding like a drum solo gone wrong. Vinny was grabbing his wrist, making little gasping sounds. I was frozen, my hand still in my pocket, touching the cold metal of my piece. That old man, Elias, he hadn't even used force, not really. Just that one strange touch, and Vinny was out of the fight. It wasn't normal. Nothing about this was normal. The quiet ranch, the calm old man, the way he moved like water while we were stuck in the mud. Elias didn't press his advantage. He just stood there, between us and the door, completely relaxed. But it wasn't a lazy relax. It was the kind of stillness you see in a wild animal right before it moves. Every muscle was ready, just waiting. I looked at Vinny again. He was shaking his head, muttering something I couldn't hear. He looked scared, and that made two of us. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. Run? Fight? Beg? None of them seemed like good options against whatever this guy was. Elias took a step then. Just one. Towards me. I flinched, but I didn't run. My feet felt glued to the porch. He didn't look angry, didn't look like he was going to hurt me bad. It was worse. He looked practical, like we were just a problem to be solved. He moved with that same unsettling smoothness. No wasted movement. Every step was quiet, steady. He wasn't big and bulky like some tough guys, but he filled the space around him. He felt dangerous, like standing too close to a cliff edge. He reached me in 2 more steps. I finally pulled my hand from my pocket, the metal piece feeling small and useless. I didn't even raise it, just held it there like maybe he wouldn't notice. Stupid, I know, but my brain wasn't working right. He glanced down at my hand, just like he had with Vinny's crowbar. That same quick, knowing look. Then his hand moved again. Faster this time. Maybe I was just watching closer. He didn't grab my hand with the piece. He touched my elbow, just the side of it, with his fingers. It wasn't a hard push, but my arm suddenly felt like wet spaghetti. The piece dropped from my numb fingers and hit the porch with a small thud. Before I could even react, he was behind me. How'd he do that? He was right in front of me, and in the next second, I felt his hands on my arms, gentle but strong. He turned me around easy, like I weighed nothing. My back was to the house now, facing Vinny. Vinny was staring, mouth open. Elias didn't tie us up right there. He just held my arms, keeping me steady while he spoke. His voice was still quiet, but there was a new edge to it. Authority. Inside, he said. Not a question, a command. Vinny seemed to snap out of it. He looked from Elias to the open door, then back at me. He still looked scared, but he picked up his crowbar, slowly, like it might bite him. Elias let go of me, and I could move again, but my arms still felt weird. He gestured towards the door with his head. We walked inside. The house was simple, clean. Smelled like wood smoke and something else, something earthy. Elias closed the door behind us. Quiet click of the lock echoing loud in the sudden quiet of the house. He didn't rush us, just pointed towards the living room. A couple of old chairs, a simple table. Nothing fancy. He told us to sit down. We did. My legs felt weak anyway. Elias went over to a cabinet, took out some rope. Not thick stuff, but looked strong. He came towards us. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning, just doing what needed to be done. And I knew, sitting there, watching him, that we hadn't just messed with a rancher. We had stumbled into something much bigger, something that had followed this man all the way out here to the quiet country. Who was he, really? My wrist still ached, a dull, deep pain, and my head hurt, trying to understand what happened. We were tied to chairs in the living room. Not tight enough to cut off blood, but tight enough we weren't going anywhere. My hands were tied in front of me. Vinny's were too. It was humbling, being tied up by an old man on his own porch. Elias was moving around the room, slow and calm now that we weren't trying to threaten him. He picked up my piece from the porch, came back in, looked at it for a second, then put it on a shelf high up, out of reach. He did the same with Vinny's crowbar, like he was putting away toys. He didn't look at us much. Walked over to a sink in the corner, filled a glass with water, drank it slow. We just watched him. What was he going to do? Call the cops? Didn't seem like his style. Hurt us? He could have done that easy outside. Kill us? The thought made my stomach clench. But he didn't act like a killer. Not a mean one. Anyway, he just acted tired, like this was a bother. After he finished his water, he finally looked at us. Really looked. His eyes weren't ice chips anymore. They just looked sad. That threw me even more than him disarming me. Sad? Why would he be sad? He had us, the guys who came to mess with him. You work for Carmine? He asked. His voice was quiet again. Yeah, I mumbled. What else could I say? He nodded slow. Figured. He walked over to the window, looked out at the setting sun. The sky was a fiery orange now. Beautiful, but I couldn't enjoy it. Carmine sends kids to do his dirty work now, he said, more to himself than to us. He sighed a long, heavy sound. He's changed. Changed? Carmine was always Carmine. Tough, demanding, didn't care who he stepped on. You know Carmine? I asked, surprised. Elias turned back from the window. A small, humorless smile touched his lips. We go way back, he said. He walked over to a different shelf, pulled out a small wooden box. He ran his fingers over it. Didn't open it. Long before he was Mr. Carmine, he said. He looked at the box, then back at us. Before he lost his brother. My blood ran cold again, but for a different reason this time. Carmine's brother. Marco. Nobody talked about Marco. He died years ago, supposedly in some accident far away. It was a touchy subject with Carmine. How did this old rancher know about Marco? And what did he mean before he lost his brother? Elias looked from a box to my face. You know about Marco? He asked. A little, I said. Carmine doesn't talk about him. Elias nodded. No, he said softly. He wouldn't. He paused, the quiet of the house pressing in again. Then he said something that made my head spin. Tell Carmine, he said, his voice clear now, firm. Tell him, Elias says. Tell him I buried Marco myself. My eyes widened. Buried him himself? Marco died thousands of miles from here. And who was Elias? Not just a rancher. Not just some tough old guy. He knew Carmine. He knew Marco. And he buried him? The shock of being captured was bad, but this felt like the ground was shifting under me. What kind of connection did this quiet, deadly man have to Carmine's dead brother? And what did it mean for us? My brain felt foggy, like static on a bad radio. You buried Marco? I stared at Elias, still tied to the chair. It didn't make sense. Marco, Carmine's brother, died overseas. The story was he was gone, end of it. Nobody from the family was there. How could this rancher have buried him? Elias finally opened the small wooden box he'd shown us. Inside, on a piece of old cloth, was a shiny metal coin. Looked heavy, and next to it, a folded piece of paper, yellow with age. He didn't touch the paper, just the coin, rubbing his thumb over it. We were in the same unit, Elias said, his voice even quieter now, like he was talking about a secret. Went through hell together, Marco and me. He was the best of us. Always looked out. Had my back more times than I can count. He looked at the coin. Took this off of myself. His lucky coin. My eyes flicked to Vinny. He was watching Elias too. His usual tough guy looked completely gone, replaced by just listening. Elias looked up, his gaze drifting somewhere past us, maybe back to that time. They don't tell the truth about places like that, he said, or about the men who go there. We weren't just soldiers. We were something else. Trained to go where others couldn't. Do things others wouldn't. Get in, get the job done, disappear. He paused, that sad look back in his eyes. They called us Delta. The word hung in the air. Delta. I'd heard that name before. Whispers. Legends. Soldiers who were more like ghosts, more like machines. Trained to kill. To survive anything. It clicked into place then. The way he moved, the way he disarmed us, the eyes that saw everything. It wasn't just being a tough old guy. It was being one of them. And Carmine's brother. Marco was one too. It made a weird kind of sense suddenly. Marco was always a bit of a mystery, even in Carmine's stories. We were on a job, Elias continued, his voice steady, telling the story like he'd told it 100 times in his head. Things went bad. Real bad. Ambush. Nasty one. He closed his eyes for a second, like he was seeing it again. Marco. He saved us. Gave us the time we needed to get out. But he didn't make it. Elias opened his eyes. They looked wet for a second, but he blinked it away. I went back for him. Couldn't leave him there. Not Marco. He took a deep breath. The fighting was still going on, but I got to him. He was gone. Quick. Didn't suffer. Elias's voice was rougher now. I couldn't bring him all the way back. Not through that mess. Not with the others counting on me. He looked down at the wooden box again. But I made sure he had a place. Quiet. Safe. Buried him myself, with the respect he deserved. Said some words. He touched the folded paper. He had this on him. Started writing it before we went out. A letter. He looked at the letter like it was made of glass. For his family, Elias said. For Carmine. Talked about getting out. How he was tired of the life. Wanted to come home, settle down, raise a family. Said he loved Carmine, even with all their disagreements. Wanted to make things right. Elias looked from the letter to me, then to Vinny. I sent it to Carmine. Made sure it got to the city. Put it in the mail myself when I finally got back. He shook his head slowly. Guess he never got it. My mind raced. Carmine always said Marco never reached out. Never tried to leave the life, that he died a soldier through and through. But Elias was saying Marco wanted out, that he wrote a letter saying he loved Carmine. wanted things to be good between them. A letter Carmine supposedly never received. Was Carmine lying? Or did the letter just disappear? Hearing Elias talk about Marco, the pain in his voice, the way he touched that coin, it felt real. More real than anything Carmine ever said about his brother. This quiet, deadly man wasn't just a former soldier. He was the last piece of Marco's real story. And he was sitting right in front of us. What would Carmine do if he knew Elias was here? If he knew the truth about that letter? The quiet settled back in after Elias finished talking about Marco. It wasn't the same quiet as before, though. It was heavy, full of things unsaid. We were still tied up, but somehow that didn't feel like the main problem anymore. My head was buzzing with the story. Marco, Delta, the letter, Carmine. It was like finding out everything you thought you knew was built on sand. Elias put the wooden box back on the shelf. He didn't look at us for a long minute. Just stood there, looking out the window again at the dark sky. Finally, he turned. He walked over to me first. I flinched a little, even though he didn't look angry. He knelt down, his movements still smooth and easy, not like someone his age. He started untying the ropes around my hands. They were tight, and my wrists felt stiff. He was careful, though, didn't just yank them. You boys got caught up in something that ain't yours, he said, his voice low. Shouldn't have come here. He finished with my hands, then moved to my feet. The blood rushed back in, pins and needles poking everywhere. It hurt, but it felt good to be free of the ropes. He moved over to Vinny next, started untying him. Vinny watched him, his eyes still wide. Didn't say a word. I rubbed my wrists, trying to get the feeling back. I looked at Elias. He was just an old man again from the outside. But knowing what he was, what he'd done, who he knew, it changed everything. He finished untying Vinny, and Vinny did the same as me, rubbing his wrists, looking bewildered. Elias stood up. He looked at us both. Get in your car, he said. Go back to the city. He walked over to the shelf where he put our stuff. Picked up the piece, my little gun. Looked at it for a second, then put it back down. He picked up Vinny's crowbar. Leave this, he said. You won't need it. He put the crowbar back. It felt weird leaving it behind, like leaving part of our job here. But I didn't argue. He walked us to the door. Didn't rush us. The air outside was cool now. The moon was starting to come up. Tell Carmine what I told you, Elias said, standing in the doorway. About Marco. About the letter. Tell him Elias is still here. And I remember, his eyes met mine for a second. There was a warning there, clear as day. But there was something else too. A deep sadness. We walked to the car, not running, but not slow either. Just moving, like we were in a dream. Got in the car. It smelled like stale smoke and freedom. Vinny fumbled with the keys, started the engine. The car coughed to life. We pulled away from the house, turning around in the dusty yard. I looked back at the porch. Elias was still standing there, watching us go. A lone figure in the moonlight. As we drove down the dirt road, the dust following us like a ghost, neither of us said anything for a long time. Vinny was driving slow, careful. The silence in the car was different from the silence of the ranch. It was our silence, full of everything that had just happened. Finally, Vinny spoke. Marco, Delta, he mumbled. Carmine's brother? Yeah, I said, my voice quiet. Elias, he was one of them. I thought about the letter, about Marco wanting out, about Carmine saying he never heard from him. He buried him, Vinny, with his own hands. The weight of it sat between us. We came here to scare an old man for Carmine. We left with the ghost of Carmine's brother and the knowledge that the quiet rancher was more dangerous than anyone we'd ever met. What were we going to tell Carmine? How do you tell the boss that you mess with a ghost, and that the ghost knows his deepest secret? The ride back to the city felt a lot longer and a lot colder than the ride out.